what are some things you can do and what some things that you certainly should not do when it comes to your site maintenance?
When you have these Powersports dealers that will have like 3 pages on the website besides their inventory, and they've got a million different things on each page, you need to remember the 1 page per concept thing. And this is where service is usually the most lacking area, because they'll have 1 page that says, hey, here's ABC Powersports service department. And all that page is an iframed in scheduling system where you can schedule service.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of the Dealership Fixit. I am super excited to have a master of SEO with us today. His name is Greg Gifford. He's the COO of Search Lab. And just a personal story here, I've seen Greg speak many times over many years. He's a masterful presenter, very colorful in his presentations, and often ties in something to do with movies or some other genre that helps kind of paint the picture of you telling the story of SEO and best practices. So I just want to say thank you, man. It's really an honor to have you on the podcast here. I've got a lot of great questions. So thanks for coming on, Greg.
Oh man, happy to be here.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I know these things are always a little awkward, and you and I are talking here. But what I wanted to talk about today was the recent studies that you found in terms of the data points on how much the Google Business Profile is really helping out dealerships.
Yeah.
So this podcast here is it's mainly geared towards Powersports dealerships. They kind of run in the same verticals as automotive, and I know that you play more in that space. But when we talk about all these different attributes of how a dealership can just gain as much exposure online, SEO seems to be kind of this voodoo-ish, magical, I think I know what to do, I'll do some best practices, but it's hard to measure and you can't really quantify any of the results, at least for the short term. So before we kind of get into some of the findings here, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about your story, your entry into this whole SEO game and how you help dealers with
Yeah,
that
totally.
aspect?
I kind of fell into SEO, honestly. Way back in the day, I did Flash, the animated website stuff that used to be really prevalent. And I had my own company doing it, and my partners and I decided to kind of split it up and go our separate ways. So I was looking for a job, and I was really good at Flash, and it kind of came down to either working at Match.com or at a company called Autorevo that does websites for independent car dealers. And I ended up going to Autorevo and have been automotive or automotive adjacent ever since. And that was probably about 20 years ago. A long time. And so, yeah, I mean, I've just kind of really got into SEO, not knowing I was in SEO when I was doing the Flash website thing, because we'd create these awesome websites, but Google couldn't see the content because the content was inside of Flash. So even though to users, it looked like a multi-page website, to Google, it was just 1 page with a file on it, and Google couldn't see stuff. So we figured out a way to get Google to see the content, which, knowing now what I didn't know then, was like super illegal and way against the rules in Google, but it worked. So that was when I started figuring out, hey, what do we need to do to get websites to show up in Google? And then once I got to Autorevo, I started there as a Flash designer, and then pretty quickly was in charge of the design department, and then pretty quickly was in charge of marketing for the whole company. And then when they wanted to start selling SEO as a service, we started interviewing, and we couldn't find anyone that knew as much as I did. So the owner wanted me to start the department because we can hire anybody to do marketing. And that's when I officially really got into it. And then I just kind of fell in love with it, started doing a lot of research, started digging in, started learning as much as I could. Got lucky in that I spoke at a conference and everybody liked my speaking style. So I started getting invited to more and more conferences. And now I'm lucky enough to get to go to conferences all over the world and do this SEO thing. So it's pretty awesome.
You were just in Australia, right? Speaking.
I just got back from Australia not quite 2 weeks ago. Still trying to get over the jet lag. It's crazy. It was really bad this time coming back. But I mean, you're a day in the future, so yeah. It's difficult. And then, now that I'm finally getting over this jet lag, I'm about to go spend 2 weeks in Europe for the first half of April. So I guess I'm doing it to myself. I'm never going to sleep right again.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad little perk that you get to go visit all these, wonderful places. And
yeah, it does kind of make up for the fact that I speak at a ton of conferences. 2 years ago, I did 32. Last year, I did 25. And I usually get anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 really cool international conferences every year. And I can take my wife along to those, and that kind of makes up for all the other times that I'm gone a lot.
Well, there it is, kids. Do something that you love and that you're really great at, and you might just travel the world like Greg. That's cool, man. That's cool. All right. So after the Autorevo, you had a business with DFW Search. You went to Dealer On. You were at Wikimotive, and then now you're at Search Lab. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Search Lab now.
So yeah, so I'm the COO. So basically, I'm the guy that runs the processes for everything in the company. most people don't ever really talk about the COO. They talk about the CEO, and the easiest way to explain it is the CEO is the idea guy. The COO guy is the guy that figures out, or guy or girl, it doesn't have to be a guy, but the COO is the role that figures out how to make the ideas that the CEO has happen in the real world. So I've always been a very analytical and process oriented guy. So my brain just works for this role. Somebody can say, oh, we could do this. And my brain is immediately thinking of steps 1 through 50 of how to get there. So it's kind of cool because I don't really talk to clients anymore. I don't really have to manage team members anymore. So I really have about 5 people on the leadership team that I talk to on the regular, and I get to play in spreadsheets and do my own thing. So I really enjoy my job.
That's cool, man. And the clients that you have within Search Lab, of course, there's dealerships, but there's also other businesses that you work for as well.
If you're a motorcycle and powersports dealer, you already know the biggest marketplace websites are clunky, slow, and riddled with ads. Even if you pay big bucks to list your inventory, your competitors can pay even more to outrank you. That's why we created MotoHunt. Our site is famously streamlined and quick, with no extra nonsense to confuse buyers or dealers. That's why we rank so high in search results without having to spend millions in advertising. Why pay 3 times as much? At MotoHunt, one low price covers everything a dealer needs to get their inventory listed and collecting leads fast, with no multi-level pricing tiers and no way for your competition to out-premium you. No matter how many listings or leads you generate, your subscription price is the same. Click the link to find out how MotoHunt can help you start generating more leads today.
Lab is not automotive specific. We work in a lot of different verticals, but we do have a lot of car dealership clients just because I have been in automotive for such a long time and still speak at all the automotive events. We've got some adjacent stuff. We've got several RV dealers, a couple Powersports dealers. We've got some attorneys. We've got some healthcare stuff. We've got a restaurant. We've got a bunch of different random other things. We do local SEO, so it's any business that needs to show up in a particular geographic area. And then we do paid search as well, so PPC, and we've got a bunch of different clients that do all sorts of different things on the paid search side.
Just helping people get found online, right?
Yep, okay. Exactly. It's all about how do you get found more often so you get more phone calls.
It's all about the battle of the eyeball, right? Impressions and getting found. Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because having such a broad client base, you're able to kind of see a little bit more rather than just one vertical or one type of business.
Sure.
And so that leads to maybe some experimenting as way that I kind of understand it. So the article that you had posted about a 2-year study, and we'll have the link for this in the show notes as well for anybody that wants to read it. But some of the things that I took away from it is that you really put more weight into the GB, the Google Business Profile, and you had a tip in there about separating out your departments. Now that's brand new to me, but you kind of outlined it. You want one for sales, one for parts, one for service.
Yep.
And you also kind of had some other things in there talking about the categories and having a priority category, as well as using all the rest of them that they have listed available.
Yep.
If there's a category for your business. Can you kind of just dive into that topic there and kind of help us, for the average dealer that's listening to us, how would they go about starting that or going down that road?
So the whole kind of purpose behind this study is that, like you mentioned at the beginning, SEO seems to be a lot of like smoke and mirrors and magic and voodoo, and it's hard to exactly attribute. And you always seem to have these experts, or even sometimes just salespeople, up on stage at conferences talking about SEO, and they're just talking about best practices. Here's how to do SEO, or here's what works, or here's what doesn't work. And you watch podcasts or webinars, and it's the same thing. It's somebody telling you how SEO works. Or you read blog posts or watch videos on TikTok or YouTube, and it's always somebody telling you how the stuff works, but they're not actually showing you proof that the stuff works. And obviously, if somebody's speaking at a conference, most of the time you can trust that person knows their stuff, because they wouldn't get to speak at a lot of conferences if they weren't sharing helpful information. But then you do have a lot of conferences in automotive and powersports where it's a pay-to-play situation. So the person speaking at the conference is speaking because they paid for sponsorship. They may not know anything about what they're talking about, and they're just trying to get you to buy that product or service. So I wanted to take a different approach and do research. And a lot of people will go try to do research and then make a blanket statement that says, hey, according to our research, this is how Google works. But nobody has the scale or the ability to do things at scale that Google does. You can't do a study of 200 businesses and then make the assumption that what you found in that study applies to every business online. Right. And we also know that Google will treat verticals differently. The way that it treats car dealers is different than the way that it treats attorneys, which is different than the way that it treats doctors. So when we did this study, we wanted to specifically look at the Google business profile. Not that it's more important, but it's extremely important because your Google business profile is what allows you to show in those map pack search results where you've got, it shows up above the organic results and it's the map and the three little, depending on desktop, it's going to be the map to the side with the listings next to it. On mobile, it's the map with the three listings underneath. And that's like kind of the golden zone. You really want to be there because it gives you a lot of visibility and it shows people this guy's really close. It shows you reviews. So it's really important for the map pack. And then for branded searches, your Google business profile is what's going to show over there on the right side of the screen on desktop. And it shows at the top on mobile. That's your first impression with any potential customer. That's really, truly the homepage of your business, not the homepage of your website. So that's why we concentrated on that in the study. And because we didn't want to make the mistake of studying a bit and saying this applies to everybody, I wanted to check 3 different verticals. So we looked at car dealers because that's the primary vertical that is the biggest part of our customer base. We looked at personal injury attorneys because personal injury attorneys are the most SEO savvy. They're the ones that are most knowledgeable in general about SEO and the most aggressive with the strategies they use. And then we looked at cannabis dispensaries because it's now legal to use recreational cannabis in almost half of the country. But since it's still illegal at a federal level, you can't run social media ads or paid search ads on Google. So your only option is SEO. So we wanted to look at those 3 to get kind of 3 different states of how do these numbers look. And I wasn't trying to do this as a study where we finish the study and come out and say, here's how local search works, or here's how Google works for car dealers, and here's how it works for attorneys. The entire purpose was to say, look, here are all of these best practices that all of the experts agree are the things that matter to Google. When we do this research, does the research on all these Google business profiles back up those best practices? If best practice says do this way and you'll have more visibility, does the number 1 ranked business in the map pack do that more often than the number 10 ranked business in the map pack? And we also know that there is no silver bullet for SEO. It's the aggregate of all of the signals working together. So you can't really say this one thing is more important than another, although you can usually tell from research if one thing has more weight in the algorithm or not. So really, we weren't trying to make any assumptions or tell people this is how it works. The entire purpose of the study was to say, we're going to look at all these numbers. We're going to compare the guys that rank number 1 to number 10 to number 20 and look at all of these different possible things that we know that the algorithm is looking at. And for each individual best practice line item, do the results match expectations? And in 90% of the cases, they did. So does that mean anything? I mean, it could completely be correlation and not causation. We don't know. I don't think there's a way to do it where you're scientifically, statistically relevant enough to say, yes, for sure, this definitely does matter. But I think it's pretty compelling that you could definitely see the difference between the primary category choice is hugely influential. You could see a difference. The guys that rank number 1 all have the correct category chosen. The guys that rank number 10 have other categories chosen. Number of inbound links is a clear correlation. There's a lot of things that everyone says are best practice, but nobody has really proved it. And I'm not saying we proved it, but I am saying the data does really back up most of the time what general best practice is believed to be.
Well, let me keep the surface level, Greg. When you say that we saw the data prove that this worked over this, what was the metric that you were going, yes, this is what we want versus this is what we don't want? Is it clicks?
Well, yeah,
is it impressions?
So we didn't actually look at clicks or impressions at all because we can't get click data for business profiles or websites that we don't have access to. So we used a couple of different tools. We used Places Scout, which is by far the best local SEO tool out there. And we used Ahrefs, which is a link research tool. And we used both of those tools to pull a bunch of different data points. So I don't remember the exact number, but it was over 8,700 Google business profiles from like 20 different cities. And we looked at them over 2 years. And then when you have the map pack, that shows you 3 results. But at the bottom of the map pack, you can click a button that either says more places or more locations. It's kind of different depending on what the vertical is. That takes you to what's called the local finder page. It looks really similar to Google Maps, but it's actually a little bit different. And that local finder page goes beyond the top 3 and shows you every business that matches the intent of your search query in that area. So we pulled data on everything from position 1 through position 20 in that local finder page. And it was 3.6 million data points across all of the different things in the business profile. So business name, address, map pin location of the address, categories, hours, questions in the Q&A section, Google posts, all these different factors that we could look at. We also looked at reviews and responses to reviews and the pace of reviews and the number of reviews and the aggregate score. And we also looked at those on Google or on Yelp, because in the United States, if you look on Apple Maps, the review stars that show on Apple Maps come from Yelp and not from Google. So we wanted to look at all of that and see, a number of photos, all these kinds of things, every data point within that Google business profile. We looked at all of those to see. And some of those things don't influence ranking. Like your photos, they don't influence ranking, but it's a conversion factor. And we still want to look at, we kind of broke down the things between ranking factors or assumed ranking factors. These are the things that the general public assumes are factors that will influence your visibility. And most of those assumptions are correct. And then there's conversion factors, like the questions in the Q&A section or the photos that don't affect ranking, but they will affect conversions from potential customers. So there's a lot of things like that. And like the department thing that you mentioned earlier, where car dealers are allowed to set up, and powersports dealers as well, dealerships that sell vehicles are allowed to set up a separate Google business profile for the service department and a separate Google business profile for the parts department, and kind of break the rules of what Google has stated for the general public of what's allowed to be done with a Google business profile. But you can't set up department profiles for attorneys or for cannabis dispensaries. So there were some things that we looked at that were specific just to automotive, because there's some things that you could do with your business profile that you can't with some of the other verticals.
And so that was what was most surprising to me, is breaking the rules of Google and the golden rules, having one singular business address listing on Google profiles. But you're saying, no, you can have a ABC Motorsports sales department and have a separate profile, ABC Motorsports service department.
Yep.
How would that interplay with the user? I mean, when they're searching, depend on the intent, right? If I'm looking for a place to fix my motorcycle, that the service Google business profile will come up, versus I want to buy a motorcycle, the sales department one will come up, and it would just increase the chances.
Yeah. So one of the most influential factors that will determine how you rank in searches is the categories that you choose for your business profile. And there are 10 category slots. It's very rare to have a business that can use all 10. You don't need to use all 10. You need to use whichever ones actually apply to your business. And part of the study was pointing out all of the boneheaded things that car dealers would pick. Like they would pick appraisal service because they appraise the value of your car for your trade-in. But that's not what an appraisal service is. A lot of dealers are putting chauffeur service because I guess they'll pick you up and do service on your car and come back and get you. But that's not a chauffeur service. Like there's some boneheaded things like that. But still, the category choices really matter. And at least for car dealer or for new car dealers, there are more than 10 categories that apply to sales and more than 10 that apply to parts and more than 10 that apply to service. So you can't really pick all of them for one profile. And another really big thing, and this plays into the user interaction, is typically the service and parts department hours don't match the sales department hours. So if you have a single profile for ABC Motorsports that says the dealership is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., but service opens at 7 a.m. and closes at 6 p.m., then there's a disconnect there. And once you have that separate service department profile set up, you can do some things to get it explicitly listed on that primary profile. So the main profile for ABC Motorsports will list the hours. But if ABC Motorsports now has an explicitly listed department for ABC Motorsports service, now when you click to view the hours of ABC Motorsports, it'll say ABC Motorsports open 9 to 9. Service department open 7 to 7. So it breaks the hours out on that main profile so that people can see the difference there. So you have the massive boost of being able to show up better for service related searches and parts related searches by having a dedicated listing just for that. But also the benefit from the customer standpoint of it's a better customer experience to see that there are different hours for different departments. And I think the reason that Google did this is because Google understands that for certain business types, those rules are a bit too stringent. Like you have to have one business at one address, you have to have permanent signage, you have to have a separate entrance for that business and your own staff at that location. Most dealerships, both automotive and powersports and RV, they'll have a service department, but it's not a separate sign. You have one sign out on the lot or on the front of the building for the dealership, but you don't have a separate sign that says this is ABC Motorsports Service. So you're already breaking the rules because you don't have a separate sign. You don't usually have a separate entrance. Yeah, sure, there's the service drive that you can pull your bike into, but that's just the place. That's like a service bay to pull your bike into, not a separate entrance that you would walk into as a customer.
Right.
And sometimes dealerships have one receptionist to answer the phone for all three departments, and then they'll route you to a department, which means you don't have separate staff. But Google understands that specifically for cars and power sports and RVs and boats, every customer is not the same. Some people are buying a new vehicle or a new to them used vehicle Some people are still current customers because they come in for service every 6 to 8 months, but they're not going to buy a vehicle. But that's a big business center for the dealership and a big need for customers to be served what their intent is. And their intent is to get service. So it makes more sense for Google to allow dealerships to split those up.
I think it makes total sense. I mean, a lot of these operators listening to this, they would already agree that I'm already running multiple businesses, right? They service in the part. I mean, they're two, totally different businesses, and the customers are different intentions. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm glad Google is following along those lines. You said something earlier, and I want to just come back to that. You mentioned there's no silver bullet for SEO. It's really just an aggregate of all the signals working together. Now, the weight rating in one of your pie charts that I saw, you kind of had 6 different sections that kind of make up a total great SEO strategy. Google Business being a major factor of that. What would you say the second biggest factor of the SEO strategy is for a dealer?
So it kind of depends on whether we're talking about showing up in the map pack or in Google Maps, or talking about showing up in organic, because the signal strengths are different between those two. If we're talking about the map pack, for sure, your Google Business profile is number one most important. Second most important is probably your reviews on Google. And then it's the content on your site, and then links. When we're talking about organic, then the Google Business profile is much less important, and then it's much more about the content on your site and the links pointed to your site.
Okay, let's go down the road real quick of the reviews. It's not a new thing, right? People have been trying to collect positive 4 and 5-star reviews since they've been invented on Google. But what is one way that dealers can really just generate more without having to rely on the customer to do it upon themselves?
That's a great question. And the most important thing is actually really simple. You just have to ask every customer. And a lot of dealers freak out and they say, no, if I ask every customer, I'm going to get more bad reviews because everybody's pissed off about something. But that's not actually the case. If somebody's really upset, they're going to leave a bad review, whether you ask them or not.
Right.
If somebody's really happy, they're probably not going to leave a review from you. It's not human nature to leave a review when you're happy. We've all been trained that that's a place to go to complain. And unless you're just a power reviewer and you're somebody that likes to review businesses, you don't leave that review. When I speak at conferences, I always use fish tacos as an example because I live in Dallas. We're landlocked. You can't get good seafood in Dallas. So whenever I go somewhere like Australia, where I just was, that has seafood, I'm eating seafood all the time, and I love to get fish tacos. If I go get a fish taco, take a bite, and there's a Band-Aid in it, okay, for sure I'm leaving a bad review for that business on Google. But if I take a bite and it's the most delicious fish taco I've ever had, I'm probably not even going to think about leaving a review. Right. But if you and I were sitting there having a meal together and we were chatting while we were eating, and the waiter or waitress walks by and I take a bite and go, holy shit, bro, this is the best fish taco I've ever had in my life. And the waiter or waitress says, whoa, really? Like, sorry to eavesdrop, but is it really the best one you've ever had? And I'm like, I am not lying. This is like the most amazing fish taco I've had in my life. And then that waiter or waitress says, oh, that's really cool. You know, would you mind leaving that on Google as a review to share that with other people? At that point, I feel obligated to do so because I was just bragging about how it was amazing. And then they asked me to leave that review to share it with other people. I am 1,000% more likely to leave that review at that point. So that's really the key, is you've got to ask every customer to leave a review and then make it easy for customers to leave reviews. So the best thing to do is set up a page on your site, and we typically will put this on the submenu under About Us, and the submenu link is just leave us a review. And that page has a simple thank you message that says something to the effect of, thanks for doing business with us today. We'd love it if you could share your experience with other people. Please leave us a review on one of the following sites. And then you give them options, because you don't want to push everybody to Google, because that's not natural. And you don't want to push everybody to Yelp, because that's not natural. You don't want to push everybody to Facebook or DealerRater or whatever platform you might care about. So what you do is you give people options and let them go where they feel the most comfortable. And that way it's a really simple page to get to on the site. And typically it would be, abcmotorsports.com/reviews or /leave-review, or some really simple URL that everyone at the dealership can easily remember. And that way, at every point of customer interaction, it's easy to go, hey, we'd love it if you could leave us a review. You can go to this abcmotorsports.com/reviews and leave us a review. Then it's easy to include a link to that page in all of your follow-up emails that you send after service or after sales. You can put that QR code on social media. You can even print it out and have it on your front door. When you do that, it's a lot easier. If you're just like, hey, leave me a review, customers don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. When you do that and make it idiot-proof, you get significantly more reviews than you would otherwise.
That's great. Those are all great tips, and anybody listening to this should employ all those, starting with the landing page. Let's go to the other side of that. So let's say a dealer's doing this. We're collecting many reviews weekly. How is it important that dealers respond to these reviews, good or bad?
So yeah, the responses are really important, and that's what we call a conversion factor, because responses to reviews will not affect how you show up in search results or how you rank in search results, but responses are important because potential customers want to see those responses. Now, do potential customers care that you respond to every single good review that you get? No, but the reason you want to respond to every good review is because if someone leaves a review, and then the business responds to the review, Google sends that person a message and says, the business just responded to your review. And if somebody's going to take the time to take a couple of minutes to leave an awesome review for you, it's not that hard to just put a quick little, hey, thanks for the amazing review, Jim or Susan or whatever, right? With the bad reviews, you got to respond to the bad reviews, because if you got a bunch of bad reviews and you're not responding to them, it looks like you're ignoring your pissed off customers.
Yeah.
And you don't want to put the same generic response. It's like, hey, I'm sorry, we strive for great customer service. I'm Greg, I'm the service manager. Can you call me at this number and tell me a little bit more about what happened? Because when you paste that same response to every bad review, again, it looks like you don't really care about that person. And you should know who that person is anyway, because they clearly came into the dealership, whether they were buying something or trying to buy something, or whether they came in for service or parts. You should have their information in your system. So when you get that bad review, you reach out in the real world and try to correct that bad mistake, or just make that person happy. Your response to the negative reviews isn't actually to respond to the person that left the review. Your response is for every potential customer in the future that's going to read that bad review and wants to see how you handle the situation. So you actually need to address what happened. If you screwed up, admit it. Say, you know what? We screwed up. I am so sorry. You know, one of the ones that always, for whatever reason, is stuck in my head is years ago, we had a bad review that came in, and it was a dealership, I think in Louisiana, and somebody came in to get their car serviced. I don't even remember what the service was. It doesn't matter. And they left their sunglasses in the car, and it was like a $300 pair of sunglasses. And when they picked their car up, the sunglasses were gone. And they didn't notice it, or they didn't say anything at the time, but then they got home and they left a bad review that very night. That was like, don't ever go to this dealership. I took my car in for service. I left my sunglasses in the car, and when I picked my car up, they were gone. They were $300 sunglasses. Man, this sucks. Like, I'm so screwed, blah, 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 blah. Dealership called the person, said, you know what? We're going to find out what happened. We definitely didn't steal your sunglasses. Let's look. They went back and they were lucky that they had like a video system, and they saw that when they were cleaning out the car, the sunglasses had actually been in like some little side bin on the middle console or something. I forget exactly the details, but they literally saw them get swept out and put in the trash, like inadvertently.
Oh, wow.
And so they called the customer back like the very next day and said, look, we accidentally threw them away. We're really sorry, but we went ahead and ordered the same sunglasses from you on Amazon. They're going to be here tomorrow at the dealership. If you would like to come pick them up, we can. Otherwise, we can ship them to your house. And that customer came back and changed their review and said, you know what? I left a bad review, but it was a complete accident. They figured it out. They fixed it. But when we put the review response up, saying, look, you know what? We're sorry. We screwed up. They accidentally got thrown away. We even saw it on video. We sent you a copy of the clip to show you that we weren't just BSing you. And we've ordered those new glasses, and they're going to be here tomorrow. That's a much better response than going, hey, Jim, we're sorry you had a bad experience, and we're not really sure what happened, but if you can call us and tell us more. You see the difference there. Like, it's a massive difference to admit that you made a mistake, but respond that you fixed the mistake. And that's where most dealers really screw it up. They either don't answer the bad reviews, or they put the same generic response to everything, or they get into a shouting match and they're like, no, you're a moron, you suck, and you're not sharing the truth about what the situation was. And like, that's not necessarily what people are looking for. Most of the time, people leaving a bad review just want to let you know that their actual real life experience didn't meet the expectations that they had. And they're letting you know you didn't meet expectations. They don't want a response that says, we're sorry we didn't meet expectations. They want a response that says, hey, look, here's what we're going to do to fix it.
I've heard you talk about this at several of your speaking engagements, man. It's so important. Responses, and don't use a copy and paste.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this, Greg. Some people do like to mess around with the dealer, and maybe their expectations are far beyond what the dealership can provide. What would the dealer do in this public forum?
Yeah, that's a great question.
To kind of combat some of the silliness that this customer's leaving, and their expectations are just far out of whack.
A great example of that would be somebody that says, hey, I showed up for an oil change and I had to wait 5 hours. Yes. What a waste of my time. It's really easy to respond back and say, well, sorry, Mr. Jones, we're very clear on our website that we'll get you in and out if you've got an appointment. You showed up without an appointment on a Friday afternoon, and we were stacked and we were really busy. And when you showed up, we said, hey, look, you don't have an appointment. We're going to get you in as soon as we can, but it might be a couple hours. And you said, okay, and said you would wait. We're sorry it took 5 hours to get you in, but it is what it is. But you know what? We're going to give you a free oil change when you come back to make sure that you can see what the experience would be like if you had an appointment. You don't have to go, hey, man, you're an idiot. You didn't make an appointment. But you could still kind of say, look, we're really sorry. But, and the guy didn't mention in the review that he showed up without an appointment. He just like, I showed up for an oil change and waited 5 hours. And you don't have to be like, you're a liar. You didn't tell us. Like, just really nicely, hey, look, we informed you when you showed up. You didn't have an appointment. You might have to wait. We're sorry it was 5 hours, but next time make an appointment. You'll be in and out in a half hour, So most of the time when people don't have the correct expectations, it's pretty easy to speak to the fact of like, hey, look, I know this is what you're expecting, but this is why expectations didn't match. And you could do that in a respectful manner that doesn't piss people off.
That's just common sense. And I love that you framed it that way. All right. Well, kind of just wrapping up on the Google business profile reviews, that little section of our conversation here. If what I'm hearing just in layman's terms, it's to be active on these platforms, to be posting, updates, to make sure you got the right information, links, even though pictures don't do anything in terms of ranking, still be active because the customers see them and it might convert from there. So just be active on your Google profile in its simplicity, right?
Yeah, you want to fill out everything in there that's possible to be filled out, except for the area that says areas served. A lot of people will think that if they go in and throw a bunch of cities in there, that means they're going to show up in those cities. That's not actually what that field is for. To be eligible for a Google Business Profile, you have to do face-to-face business with customers, either at a brick and mortar location like a dealership, or like an electrician or a plumber where you go to the customer's location to do business. But for dealerships, you got that brick and mortar location. So all the areas served field does is if you're a service business like a plumber or an electrician, you won't have your address showing because typically it's your house or something like that.
Right.
So when you fill in the areas served, all that does is it draws a little red outline on the map of how far you're willing to drive to serve customers. But it has zero influence on where you're actually going to show up in search results, especially if you do have a brick and mortar and your address is visible. That field is completely ignored by Google, yet you still see a lot of dealers going in and just shoving in, 15 to 20 cities thinking that's going to help them show up in those cities.
Okay.
Everything else, fill out everything.
Fill out everything. Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Is there anything else that maybe doesn't factor into dealerships that they shouldn't be doing that they're doing now?
No, yeah. If there's anything in there that's a field that you can fill out, you should fill it out.
Got it. Okay. Let's roll into website quality. Now, shameless to say, the powersports industry is a little lagging behind the automotive industry, and maybe the technology in terms of websites and the providers is good, but not great. I'll just put it that way. Load speed seems to be an issue. External links. I mean, there's just not a whole lot going on, but yet powersports dealers traditionally try to jam pack as much shit into one website as possible. Yeah. Okay. How can we talk to dealers to say, look, for your own benefit of SEO, search engine optimization, what are some things you can do and what's some things?
Another great question. The most important thing to remember when it comes to SEO is that if you want your dealership to show up as a search result, when a potential customer types something into Google, then you need a dedicated page of content on your website that's about that singular concept. And that page needs to be the best answer in the local area to the question that potential customer is asking. So when you have these powersports dealers that will have like 3 pages on the website besides their inventory, and they've got a million different things on each page, and they wonder why they don't show up in search results, that's typically why. You need to remember the 1 page per concept thing. And this is where service is usually the most lacking area, because they'll have 1 page that says, hey, here's ABC Powersports Service Department. And all that page is an iframed in scheduling system where you can schedule service. But there's zero information about the fact that we do oil changes and tires and batteries and all these other services that they perform for the bikes or the snow plows or the snowmobiles or the little rovers or whatever it is that we're talking about. You got to have 1 page per concept and read that text out loud. Mm-hmm. Everything that's on your site should be conversational. It should sound like something that you would say face to face to a customer that's standing there in the dealership right in front of you. And a lot of times you just shove a bunch of crap on the page, but then if you read it, you're like, wow, that doesn't make sense. I would never talk that way to a customer. So, and I'm not talking about just read through it in your head, like grab another person, have them sit next to you, read that content out loud. And if it doesn't sound conversational, it's not good content. It's not going to perform well in Google. And another thing is a lot of people treat content for customers and content for Google separately.
Yes.
And they're all worried on their website, what can I do to rank in Google? And they forget customers have problems and customers have questions. So your website needs to answer those questions and have solutions for those problems. And if you're only thinking rank in Google, rank in Google, rank in Google, you're going to miss out on the lion's share of what the website is about. And that's having the answers so that customers want to call you and buy from you. So take a step back, think about, okay, this person has never bought a vehicle in their life before. They have no idea what that process is. Explain the process. Let people know what they're going to expect when they show up to buy that vehicle. Let people know how financing works. Let people know how service works after the fact. Have those simple questions that most dealers know this stuff inherently. They've been in the business for years and they know all of this, but you forget this might be that customer's first time to ever purchase a vehicle in their life. Or if we're talking powersports, maybe it's the first time they bought a powersports vehicle in their life. And that's not always the same experience as buying a car. So what's different there? And then answer the questions about specific vehicles or vehicle types that are general questions. Another big mistake that a lot of dealerships make is they only write content for the extreme bottom of the sales funnel. It's content that's like, I want to show up and sell a vehicle off of this content. But they lose sight of the fact that nobody sits down and does a Google search and buys from the first dealership that they find. There's an entire research process that happens before that. And people are going to visit your site multiple times before they convert into a lead. So you don't want to write just that extreme bottom of funnel content. You want to write that mid and upper funnel content as well. So you've got more stuff that's just about discoverability, like putting up a billboard on the side of the highway. You want people to know that you're there, so you put up a billboard.
Yep.
Have that early funnel content that's just talking about why bikes are awesome and why you sell street bikes and not Harleys. Or stuff that's a little bit further down the funnel where it's like, hey, so you want to buy a bike, but you don't know, do you want a Ninja or do you want a Harley? Here's the differences between the two and what the ride style is going to feel like, what the cost differences are. Walk through that sort of stuff. Don't make the assumption that everybody that comes to your website already knows exactly what they want to buy.
For a Powersports dealer, there are a lot of moving parts that have a direct impact on your income. That's why Moto Hunt Premium was developed. Designed specifically for dealers, Moto Hunt Premium allows you to quickly and easily manage your inventory. With streamlined pricing data from competitive dealership listings, JD Power Pricing Guide, and National Powersport Auction wholesale prices. Moto Hunt Premium also automatically identifies potential issues with your online listings to help you move your aging inventory and maximize your gross profits. Contact us today to take a test ride of the all-new Moto Hunt Premium and see how we can help your business grow and sell more inventory.
That's so important, Greg. And maybe a year ago, we could use the excuse of, oh, I'm not a writer, or I don't know what to write, or I don't have that ability. But now with the AI tools that's just readily available, we can rattle off half a dozen of them. You can put some ideas in there, or rather ask it to ask you questions about your business so that it can write something for you. So no excuses, dealers. Do it. Greg's talking about a lot of gold here. And I really, really enjoy, taking a step back. What you said, this is the first time they're buying a motorcycle. What does that look like to a human as they would read it, not the search engine? What's our service process? What's our finance options? Those are all great tips that anybody can knock out in an afternoon using AI. That's great.
Yep.
Okay. So I want to kind of get back to some of the dealers, because we have a lot of shiny doodads and flaming whistles coming across the website, trade in this, finance that. How do some of the widgets and maybe even some of just the unneeded, unnecessary navigation tabs, this over here, that over there. I mean, literally you have a limited amount of real estate space, but there's so much bullshit fighting for the consumer's attention. Yep. I've heard you talk about this before. Can you kind of walk us down on maybe less is better?
Less is definitely better. Dealers love shiny objects. The flaming whistles, like you mentioned, they want things that jump out and like, hey, it's moving on the screen. That must mean people are going to pay attention. Yeah, people are going to pay attention to the moving on the screen, and they're going to bail and go to another website because it's annoying. So the thing that I always tell dealers is think about what you do when you get on the internet. When you land on a page and a massive pop-up covers everything, do you even read the pop-up? No, you haven't even read content on the site yet. You close the pop-up and then you read the content. So no pop-ups whatsoever. Dealers love them and they swear that they convert, but they drive away more customers than they convert. And after Google's page experience update that came out a year and a half ago, Google will actively penalize you if you have pop-ups that happen automatically that cover content on the page, especially if they're pop-ups on mobile. So you don't want to have pop-ups. There's no reason to have a pop-up, because also, like I was just talking to a car dealer yesterday that had this massive pop-up about, here's an extra $500 on any trade-in. And I'm like, all right, how many of your customers trade in a vehicle? And he was like, oh, like 85, 90%. I'm like, okay. How many of your customers are service customers and they're not buying a car? And he's like, oh, more than half. And I go, so it's not 85 to 90% of your customers that this pop-up applies to. It's like 40% of your customers or less that this applies to, because it's 80% of less than half of your customer base, because all your parts and service customers don't give a squat about that. So think about that too. You put a pop-up up, it's probably about one specific offer that doesn't apply to the vast majority of the customers coming, because even if it's a service pop-up, you got half your customers that are wanting to buy a car or buy a bike or buy a whatever we're talking about. So don't do pop-ups, and think about the customer journey. And this is something a lot of people don't think about, but again, it's a kind of a common sense thing. The links and the messaging on the page should let customers know what the next step is from that page. You are trying to drive potential customers through a funnel to inform them enough that they feel comfortable giving you their information, either through a chat or an email or a form or calling you, to convert into a potential customer. You don't do that by throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall. You do that by saying, here's next, here's what's important. And if you start having all these flashing boxes and all these other things, it's distracting people. And like a lot of dealers are starting to put those background movies on the homepage. Why? Nobody's ever going to say, yeah, I bought a bike from you because you had a cool video in the background on your homepage. It slows your site speed down, and dealers love it because it looks cool, but it distracts people. You want people to get in and browse inventory if they're coming to buy a bike. Don't distract them from that. Make it easier for them to get to your inventory list instead of harder. And then also, again, think about the direction that people are going. If someone is in an inventory area of the site, they are browsing for a new vehicle. Do not give them parts and service information. That's not what they're there for. The intent of that is to buy or potentially buy at some point soon. Don't be serving service-related or parts-related content. Same thing. When they're going down into the service section of the website, don't be giving them inventory-related stuff. Now, sure, dealers always rebut this and say, well, yeah, if somebody's coming in for service, I'm going to try to flip them into buying a new vehicle. Okay, sure, you can do that at the dealership, but that's you being a good salesperson and doing your job. But on the website, you don't have that interruption of saying, well, you know, you're doing this service and potentially you could save more money in the long run by just buying a new bike or whatever. They're in that area of the site because they've chosen to be there. You need to give them information that matches their intent and answers their questions. Same thing. If they're in parts, don't be telling them about how they can get $500 off a new bike. So be intentional. Everything that's on your site should have a reason to be there. And the more widgets and the more flashing, flaming whistles and things going all over the place you add, the worse your site is going to convert.
Especially on mobile.
Yeah.
What about the main navigation buttons? I've seen some that are just way too many. New inventory, used inventory, parts, service, customs, about us, social, contact us. I mean, there's so many.
They have so many buttons up there. Another really big thing to remember is what's on your main menu gives Google a lot of insight into what you want your customers to do and what you think your most important pages are. Don't put everything on your menu. Makes it harder to navigate. I saw one the other day that it had 13 or 14 main menu buttons, and then each submenu had 20 to 30 submenu items.
Yes.
So they had 200 links just in the menu of their site. And I'm like, guys, you only have about 250 pages on the site. You're literally linking to everything on the site from the main menu. Another one was somebody that had a service menu, and the service submenu had 35 items in it. On a desktop, you could only see the top 18. So literally half of the items in their service submenu you couldn't see. And if you clicked the service button to drop the menu down, but then you went back to the scroll bar to scroll to try to see the rest of it, then the submenu disappeared. And even worse, on mobile, when you click the hamburger icon to expand the menu and then you click service, you had to scroll through 2.5 screens just to see all the menu options there. And I'm like, guys, why do you have all these there? And they're like, well, we need to have oil changes and all these other things. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't have to be in your menu. Think about usability. Like, you're on desktop, anybody on desktop, which was actually for this dealership, 60% of their customer base or 60% of their traffic is on desktop. I'm like, 60% of the people that come to your site will never click the other 17 buttons that are on that menu because it's not visible on the screen. And I said, and on mobile, do you think everybody that wants to navigate through the service section of your website wants to scroll 2.5 times every time just to see what buttons are there? And they click a button and they're like, oh, that wasn't right. Then they have to scroll 2.5 times back. I'm like, the biggest disconnect I think that dealerships have is they know the business inside and out, and they know where everything is on the website, but they're not thinking about what I said a few minutes ago of if someone has never bought a vehicle from you before, or never bought a vehicle period before, or never serviced a vehicle before, how easy is it for them to find all the answers to their questions on your website? Having 35 menu buttons is not easy. It takes 20 seconds just to read through those 35 things. Make a better experience on your website for your customers, and that's the way that you show up better in Google.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love hearing your passion in that because I see it all the time, and I'm like, guys, what are we doing here? This is such a bad customer journey. All right. Well, we're kind of hitting the end of our hour here. So Greg, just wanted to say thank you again. One last question for you. Local dealerships, right? We're kind of getting into a time where inventory is starting to stack up at these dealerships.
Yep.
A lot of these websites, they're getting their inventory feed from, say, a central database like a DMS or some type of inventory management system, and they post them on their website. What can dealers do to help better optimize, say, inventory listings individually, like a BDP or a CERT page that can help them rank better to potential customers out there searching for those makes and models?
That's a little tougher with Powersports because the website platforms, as you mentioned earlier, are a little bit lacking. So a lot of times you don't have the ability to add additional content on those SRP pages where all of the automotive platforms allow you to do that. You just want to have some text, a couple of sentences on the page to give Google some context about that page and to let customers know what's different about you on that page instead of just having a wall of vehicle listings. But most of them will allow you to kind of create separate inventory sets. So, on your used section, you could have, used bikes for under $2,500.
Okay.
And then it's just, now instead of just having one link for used that goes and shows all your used motorcycles, you could be like used bikes under $2,000, or I'm making this up, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
But you could be, maybe you're a Harley dealer and for whatever reason you sell a lot of choppers. Have a separate inventory button that just shows your choppers. Think about the inventory sets that people are going to be looking for and create a separate inventory set for that. Because if I click view new and I'm on a Harley dealership and the only thing is just a list of all of the bikes, that's not as easy for me to have to click that inventory list and then find whatever filtering system is there and filter in and say, okay, I just want bikes that are in this price range or this particular model, where you could very easily have a inventory, view all inventory, shop by model, shop by price, whatever. So think about how you can break it down and create these different types of inventory sets that would match customer intent of what your potential customers are going to be looking for.
I love that you said that. And really what we're talking about here is we're creating these sets so that they could rank directly on Google, so that when someone searches, let's say a particular Harley model, like you said, that list of that particular Harley model comes up in a ranked search, and that's what they click on and will see. Are there a couple other factors to that? So let's say we create the inventory set. We'll say Softails, Harley Softails, right? Do we need to do a vanity URL? Do we need to do?
You don't really have to do the vanity URL unless you, if your platform allows you to customize what that URL string is. It would be ABC, abcharley.com/inventory or so let's say that the main inventory is abcharley.com/inventory.
Yep.
But your Softail page would be abcharley.com/harley-softail-dallas. So you want to have the city that you're in that URL string, if you have the ability to do that in your platform. If you don't, it's not that huge of a signal. But then once you've created that separate page of inventory, that separate SRP, you want to make sure it's optimized correctly. So the title tag needs to have the make and model and city that you're in the title tag. You want to make sure that the H1 heading on the page has the same make, model, and city. And it's just one city. Putting 5 cities won't get you to rank in 5 cities, so don't do that. Just put the city that you're in. So make, model, city on the title tag, make, model, city on the H1 heading. If you have the ability to add some content, make sure that the make, model, city is in the content at least once. If you could put that make, model, city in the URL, put it in the URL, and that will definitely help you show up better.
Metadata as well?
So the meta description doesn't influence ranking. But putting it in the meta description is still important, because the meta description is what populates those couple of gray sentences underneath your blue link when you show as a search result in Google. If you don't put a meta description, then Google's just going to pick some random text off the page. If you put something in as a meta description, then you're telling Google, this is what I want displayed if I show as a search result. So you want to approach it more like you're writing an ad. You want to write something compelling. And including that keyword phrase will help, because if someone searches Harley Softail Dallas, and you've got that in the meta description, Google will bold those words in the meta description because it matches the search query. And there's been a lot of studies that have been done over the years that show that if it's bolded in the meta description, you're more likely to get clicked.
Man, juicy information. So make, model, and city in the H1, make, model, and city in the title tag, make, model, city in the URL, and make, model, city in the content of the page. There's 4 spots where you're doing all 4 of those, all 3 of them, sorry. Wow. We talked a lot here, Greg, and I know you know this stuff like the back of your hand, but I kind of opened up this conversation as a lot of dealers look at this as, this is voodoo, it's never going to work, or I got to pay a lot of money to hire this stuff out. But what you've really shown us today is that a lot of this stuff is really easy to do if you just kind of sit down and work through some of these things that you need to check off your list to have the best SEO possible for your dealership website. All right. There's not really any trickery to this.
Yeah. And it's not really that hard to do. I would say probably at least half the dealers that we work with, it's not that they don't know how to do it. It's that they're not set up to do it. They don't have anyone internal that has the time to do this stuff, even though they may have the knowledge. Like, I've talked to several marketing managers of larger dealer groups, and they came from an agency. They know how to do SEO, but now they're the marketing manager for a dealership group, and they're handling all the offline ads and all the TV and all the print and all the radio and all the paid search, and they're coordinating vendors. They don't have time to go do SEO, and SEO is time consuming. So a lot of times we're getting hired to do SEO, even though the dealership knows how to do it, just because they don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, time is the ultimate there. So that's a good segue. If a dealer, needs this additional help, maybe there's a marketing manager or GM listening to this, and they go, "Man, I really want to do these things. Maybe I've taken a chunk out of the easy things, but I want to get more into the advanced stuff." How can you and Search Lab help out these dealers?
Oh yeah, I mean that's literally what we do. We do SEO for dealerships. So if anybody's watching and they want to get in touch and chat and see if maybe we're a good match to help them, you can just pop me an email. My email address is greg@searchlabdigital.com, and happy to chat with you, see what you've got going, let you know what we do, and see if we're a match.
I love that. And so everybody listening, we'll have that. We'll have Greg's email in the show notes as well. He is also at searchlabdigital.com. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's posting a lot of great content out there, just like he gave us today. And so I think on that note, we'll kind of wrap it up, and just want to say thank you again, Greg. Wealth of knowledge. I always enjoy listening to you and seeing your presentations. And I really, really hope that we can come back again and do another show.
Oh, I'd love to. Let me know anytime.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.